Eleanor, Carroll, and welcome to the AMS Show. Today we have our special guest, Dr. Liz Meador, the interim principal of the Aspen Middle School. Welcome, Liz. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here.
Liz, how did you become interested in becoming an educator?
Well, Eleanor, it's a long story. About 40 years ago, I lived in Juneau, Alaska, and I wanted to go to graduate school. And the only options I had at the University of Alaska were fisheries science or education. And so I decided that I wanted to be a teacher instead of a fisheries biologist. And I'm really glad that I made that decision.
What would you have done if you were a fisheries biologist, though?
If I was a fisheries biologist, I would be living in the South Pacific, studying tropical fish.
Wow. What is your philosophy of education?
My philosophy of education comes from those days of living in Alaska, where there were a lot of kids that had struggled economically, and their education was very rote and not very creative. And I realized that poor kids have a different educational experience than rich kids. So that helped me to really look into issues of equity and social justice in schools. And that informs my philosophy, because I think that school is a place, it's a public institution, and it's a place where everyone should have access to rich curriculum, engaging and exciting experiences, high quality teachers, and buildings that have heat and air conditioning and all those things. So I think my philosophy is really about providing children with the same kinds of experiences so that they can go on into society and be whatever they want to be, do whatever they want to do, and that they're not limited by the education that they had.
Wow, okay. Why is project-based education so good for students?
Project-based learning is a really exciting way to teach kids. If you think about the real world, when we're learning about things in the real world, we're learning about a variety of pieces about a topic or a place. For example, if you go to a beach and you see that there's trash on the beach, you might pick it up and you might be curious about, I wonder why there's so much trash on this beach. And you might want to do something about it. So for me, in the real world, you're really following your curiosity and following your passions. And so project-based learning takes that kind of experience and puts it into the school. So a school that's running project-based learning, an example might be that kids are wanting to learn about where their water comes from. And so they can do all kinds of research, talk to experts, go to the water district, figure out what lakes and streams and ditches feed their water supply, look at the watershed from that area, and then really think about, is there some kind of action we need to take? Is the water supply threatened? Is there information that we should be sharing with other people based on what we've learned? So project-based learning is a way to look holistically at a topic or an issue, and then to share what you've learned with others, to educate others. And it's a very engaging, real-world way to learn. So you're learning about your writing while you're doing project-based learning. You're engaged in mathematics, history, community studies. There's a lot of different pieces of the curriculum that you're engaged in. And that's why it's such an important part of how kids can learn.
How long have you taught in the Roaring Fork Valley?
I moved to the Roaring Fork Valley in 1985, and my kids went to the Aspen Community School. So I would go with them oftentimes, and I had been a teacher in Alaska. So my friend Annie Teague, who taught at the community school for a long time, she was the kindergarten teacher, she asked me if I would like to team teach with her. So that was in about 1989, I think. So Annie and myself and Chris Faison and Michael Mulry was there, Stevie Pruden. There was a lot of great teachers at the community school. And I stayed there for 3 years. And while I was there, I really got interested. I was working on my master's degree, and I really got interested in theories of education because the community school had a really different approach to education. It was very child-centered, following the kids' interest, figuring out what kids wanted to learn about, and then going in that direction. So I got interested in theories of education, and after about 3 years at the community school, I decided I wanted to get my PhD. And so I left and went down to Boulder to see you and started working on my doctorate. So I left the Valley for a few years, came back here, and when I came back, I was the principal of the Aspen Community School and have been in the Valley off and on as principal or teacher educator. I ran a teacher education program here for a long time. I worked with George Stranahan, and we designed a program to help people learn how to be teachers that wanted to stay here in the Valley and be teachers here in the Valley. So I've only taught for a few years in the Valley, but I've done a lot of other things in the field.
How do you build relationships with parents?
Parents are really important partners in schools. They are critical to our deeper understanding not only of the kids, but also of what the community wants. Every community wants something a little bit different for their children in school. And since school is a public institution, educators have a responsibility to respond to what the parents want. So I think the main way to build relationships is to be a good listener and to find out what they see as issues or struggles or successes and celebrations of the school. And I think it's important to have events for parents, to think about parent education, to bring parents in for informal opportunities, such as volunteering. Various ways for them to be in the school are all really important ways to build partnerships.
Very. I understand you have worked in many different states and many different levels of education you have experienced. Can you tell us some of the highlights?
Sure. One of the highlights was when I first got my PhD, I got to work in California at a university that was an experimental institution, and it was Cal State Monterey Bay. And this was a small university that was located at Fort Ord, which was at one time one of the largest military bases in California. And the government sold the military base to the state of California for $1 and allowed the state to put this university on it. And so it was just a really exciting place to work because we were coming up with new majors, new curriculum for students. And so I ran a master's degree program there called, it was a Master's in Social Justice. And the exciting thing about working there was that Monterey has a lot of people from all over the world that come to the There's the Monterey Institute for International Studies. There's the Naval Postgraduate School. And so as a result, my classes were filled with people from all over the world that were in Monterey and wanted to get this degree in social justice. I had students from Greece, from Eastern Europe, from South America. So that was a real highlight for me being there. Another highlight for me, I worked at Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon. And the highlight there was that it is a beautiful campus. If you can imagine, the Pacific Northwest is covered with these giant trees, beautiful, beautiful trees. And there was this hedge that ran all around the graduate school. And it was a very thick, wide hedge. And the graduate school at one time had been a convent, so that our offices were these old dormitory rooms where nuns had lived. And each door had a little teeny tiny window in the door where the mother superior would come along and peek in to make sure that the nuns were asleep. So that was kind of fun. And then going back to the hedge, there was a secret tunnel inside the hedge. And when I first started working there, another one of the professors came up to me and she said, "Come here, I want to show you something." And so I followed her outside. She was this really spry, kind of interesting college professor. So I couldn't figure out where she was taking me. And she said, "Come here, come look in this hedge." And we get to the hedge and we see there's this little space carved out. And all of a sudden she went off running into this tunnel that was inside the hedge. So I thought, well, I guess I'm supposed to follow her. And I'm tall, she was little. So I kind of crouched down and we were running through this hedge, and it turns out this tunnel went all the way around this convent, which was now the graduate school. And it was a secret. Nobody knew about it except this professor. And probably the nuns used to go in there and, hide from the Mother Superior. That was another highlight of my life as a college professor. And just to add on to that, I lived in Boulder and ran a really cool school in Boulder called Watershed School. Watershed School, it's an independent school, and it's very much a project-based school. The thing I liked the most about Watershed School was that the middle school kids were constantly out in the community interviewing people and learning about what was going on in Boulder, and that was really relevant to them. One year, I took the 8th graders to San Diego so that we could learn about a little bit about marine biology, but mostly about the environment. And as I was saying earlier, with a project that looked at trash on the beach. So we took these kids to the beach, and we actually camped at the beach. And I remember one day I gave them each a bag, and I said, "Let's go pick up trash on the beach." And we went down there, and they said, "There's no trash down here. There's no trash down here. This is a clean beach." So we were all walking along, and there were these piles of seaweed. And all of a sudden, the kids realized that in the piles of seaweed were these tiny pieces of plastic. And once you started kind of pulling these little pieces of plastic out of the seaweed, they realized that, in fact, the entire beach was covered with these little pieces of plastic. But you didn't see it right off when you first walked down there. It looked like it was just seaweed. But in fact, the seaweed had so much trash in it. And so we ended up, pulling all this trash out and getting bags and bags and bags of trash. And then we actually made art out of the trash that we picked up. And that was a very cool project. So I've had a lot of great adventures with kids, with adults, with teachers, people that want to be teachers. I feel super lucky. I think my career has been very rich and rewarding.
Back to the first highlight, did the kids who came from like all over the world, did they all speak English or different languages?
They all spoke different languages, and they were adults.
Oh.
Yeah, they were adults. So they also spoke English. But what's interesting about Monterey Bay, so I worked with teachers, right? And those were adults that were all either teachers or wanted to be teachers. But one of the places that we took those people that wanted to be teachers was an elementary school that had 47 different languages spoken. And we were trying to teach people, how do you work in a setting where there's not a lot of English spoken and there's 47 different languages? How do you teach science or social studies or whatever? What would you do in that case?
I think I would like get somebody else who would like know some of the languages. I would get different people to help like teach them. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. That's a really great idea.
What are some of the challenges facing the education in the Roaring Fork Valley?
In the Roaring Fork Valley, broadly, I think the challenges have to do with just the variety of people that are in the different schools. So we have a lot of people that struggle economically, and I don't think that's well known. I think people assume that this is a beautiful valley, it's a gorgeous place to live, and the assumption is that if you can live here, you have the money to afford nice things. But in fact, there's a lot of people that struggle and feel isolated and can't show up at school to volunteer. And so I think just figuring out, how do we create schooling for all families, even the ones that maybe need school to look a little bit different. So I think that's one piece. I think another piece that is difficult in the Roaring Fork Valley is that we're kind of isolated here, and it's harder for teachers to go and see something that's really different that might inspire them to do something different in their class. So as a result, like if teachers want to go visit another classroom to learn something, we have to get in the car, we have to drive over mountain passes. So that sense of isolation, I think, is a little bit challenging too.
If you were able to improve education and had all the money you needed, what would you do?
Oh boy, Eleanor, that's a really big question. I think what I would do is make sure that the money was able to pay for teachers' salaries, so that first of all, I would give more money to teachers. I think that would elevate the status of the teaching profession if they made as much money as doctors or lawyers. And then I would also want to make sure that there was money available so that a school could, in the middle of the year, decide to hire more people or start a different program. I mean, teachers are so creative and so smart, and they often have ideas, but then they think, oh, well, I can't do that this year because we don't have any money. I have to wait till next year. I just think giving more access to those funds to the teachers so they could, I'm going to take kids for an immersion experience in Mexico so we can practice our Spanish or whatever that might be. I think dollars could actually help. But I also want to say I would want to make sure that, going back to one of our your original questions, I would want to make sure and elevate the level of education for all kids, whether it has to do with supplies, textbooks, curriculum, teachers, the building. I would want to put money into areas that were struggling and could really use that money.
That's really interesting. What is one of the highlights of the year so far?
Honestly, the highlight of the year has been experiencing the outdoor education that Aspen Middle School provides and seeing, the just incredible piles of backpacks and the food and just the process that teachers and families and kids go through to get out in the woods or to go on a camping adventure at Arches or, it's just been phenomenal to me to see how much time and energy goes into that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, outdoor ed is, it's an amazing experience.
It
it's
is.
a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Ooh. I understand you went to Marble for the 8th grade outdoor education base camp. Well, how was that?
That was incredible. First of all, I thought I could just drive on in my car. And luckily, and I was bringing the chicken. So that's kind of a big deal. I think I had 200 or 300 pieces of chicken in my car. Because as the hikers came out of the woods and entered base camp, they wanted to have a nice hot meal for them. So we picked up all this cooked chicken, fried chicken, at City Market. And I thought, I'll just drive on up there with the chicken in my car. But it turns out the boulders on the road are about the size of this chair. So my little car was not going to make it up to base camp with the chicken. And I was quite nervous about that. Luckily, Jason Thomas, our assistant principal, has a huge pickup truck with huge tires. And so we were able to put the chicken in the back of the pickup truck. He met me in Marble at the lake and transported the chicken. And just driving up there was quite exciting. I mean, there were times when we were sideways on the road. It was a pretty rough road. So that was a big adventure. And then on day 2, when I was there, I got to go out and see all the climbing sites. So I started at the Tyrolean Traverse and watched kids, going across on this rope across the stream. And then from there, I went over to the climbing wall and watched kids that were just learning how to climb really conquer these slabs of granite. But the most exciting thing was I went up to the high rappel. And I had no idea what it was going to be like, but I got up there, and here's these kids on the edge of a cliff, roped in, and ready to, go back down, rappel down off of this. And it was super scary, and all of them were so brave and giving each other encouragement and, really conquering their fears. It was quite impressive. Not to mention the fact that Marble's probably one of the prettiest places I've seen. It was just gorgeous. So it was a really good experience.
Yeah, that's a lot to say considering that you've lived in so many states, right?
Yeah.
What would the students be surprised to find out about you?
Well, they might be surprised to find out that I have 3 children and 3 grandchildren. Yeah, so my 2 daughters are grown and live in Glenwood Springs. And that is why I moved back here from California, so I could be near the grandbabies. So I have 3 grandchildren, August, is 3, Fisher is 1.5, and Aquina is 4 months old.
Aw.
Yeah.
What is the hardest thing about being a principal?
The hardest thing about being a principal is that there is so much to get done in a day, and you want to be present and available for every single person that wants to talk to you. And for me, I'm always torn because I want to be in the classrooms. I love observing people as they're teaching and kind of figuring out who the kids are and what they're responding to. I like being in that part of the building. So it's hard when you're in the office, and I mean, I get probably 100 emails an hour. I'm not kidding you. And you sit there and you're like, oh God, I need to answer that. I need to answer that. I need to call that person. Oh my gosh, I need to do this. And then all of a sudden I look up at the clock. Oh no, it's 3 o'clock. How did that happen? So that's the hard part. There's a lot to do, but it's really fun. It's really fun work. Very exciting.
Nice. How can our school district keep great teachers working here?
I think that we do have great teachers. The people that work in the Aspen School District, they're intelligent, they're motivated, they love kids, and they love living here. So I think, first of all, hiring the right people is really important, and making sure that people come here because they really want to live here. I mean, this is a unique place to live. You know, you grew up here.
Yeah.
And it can be challenging to be in such a remote area that has difficulty getting in and out in the wintertime. For some people, that's hard. Some people love that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think hiring the right people is the first thing. But then as far as keeping them, we've got to have our salaries match the living expenses that are here. We need to be able to provide support for teachers so that they have time for planning, they can take vacations when they need to. It's a hard job.
Mm-hmm.
It is a really hard job, and teachers work so hard, and I think the more we can do to provide, you know, just a little bit of breathing room in their lives, the better.
Are you a skier?
I am a skier, yes. And in fact, I taught my 3 kids how to ski, and they all became ski racers. And to this day, I can't keep up with them. They actually, if I ski with my kids, they're like, Mom, you go over there. That's your run. We're going to jump off this cliff here. Meet you at the bottom.
Is there anything else you would like to share with us?
Let's see. It's just been such a pleasure to be here. I feel so grateful to be the interim principal, and the job itself is far more exciting and challenging and fun than I ever dreamed it would be. I feel very, very fortunate. I love the kids. The kids are just amazing, awesome children. So thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much, Liz, for being on the Aspen AMS Show. Again, I'm Eleanor Carroll, and thank you so much for watching.